you got?
Same business. Guerrillas hauling 2 guys in the chopper, followed by men with American equipment. Do you remember Afghanistan?
Trying to forget it. Come on.
Hello, and welcome to the Predator Minute Podcast, where we break down the 1987 action sci-fi classic Predator 1 minute at a time. My name is Jeff Glover.
And I'm John Zabriskie.
And thank you all for being here today. I did the intro, John. How did I do?
Hey, you nailed it. You nailed it first time.
Nailed it.
No notes.
No notes. I didn't read that from a page at all.
That's right. Like Chris Berman. Sans
That's
notes.
right. Well, hey, thanks for letting me introduce the show. It's fun to be back again.
Hey, it's fun to have you.
All right. So we are in minute 15,
Mm-hmm.
which opens up with Dutch telling Billy to get ahead and see what he can find. And it ends with Billy swinging a machete at a vine.
That rhymes.
Wow.
I did not even
I
know
didn't
that.
either.
Hey, that's why I heard it said out loud.
Go ahead and see what he can find, and ends with Billy swinging a machete at a vine.
Anytime.
Nice. All right, John, since I am the guest and you are the host, I'd like to ask you, what should we talk about first in this minute?
Why, thank you. Thank you, guest.
You're welcome.
I want to talk just briefly about the overall depth of this minute. And when I say depth, I mean the camera work. And right off the bat, what I'm noticing that I didn't really make a note of last time, but I still saw it, is the downed chopper, or the more fittingly, the hanging chopper in the trees behind Dutch, Dylan, and Poncho when they're conversing, looking back towards the chopper. If you're not really looking for it, it's kind of hard to see because it blends in so well with the trees and the vines. But then when you see it, you can't help but notice it on one side, and then what appears to be a broken helicopter blade a little bit across the way, maybe like 15 or 20 feet, and possibly stuck into the ground in the opposite hill. And I just think that gives the location itself depth, and it reminds you that, right, they just found this chopper. They're not really exploring it any more than just to find what Poncho found in the first place, which was the pilots, each with the round in the head, and everything has been stripped out of the chopper.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your notes, and I don't think I would have noticed it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, there it is in the background. Still hanging from the vines. Carl Weathers is no longer in there, sticking his head in and out of the door.
The old snuggle shack.
Snuggle shack. He's back on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you mentioned the camera work in this minute. I fully 100% agree. I think it's very, very subtle, but when you watch this minute over and over again, you really kind of see McTiernan kind of flexing his muscles here a little bit, because the way he moves the camera really does make you feel like you're in the jungle. He very deliberately will shift the beginning of a shot. He'll shift the camera, say from left to right, sort of through some leaves or branches, and then the camera will settle on, for example, conversation between Dutch and Poncho at that one point is what I'm thinking of. But he does that several times where he'll move the camera left to right, kind of a pan shot, or he'll do a rack focus, kind of focusing in on the foreground, and then the background really starts to give you a sense of your surroundings. Mm-hmm. And watching the minute over and over again, you really start to appreciate what he brings to the movie as a director.
Yeah, I like how you're explaining him flexing his muscles because he's doing a lot of different things with the camera. The camera is just moving around, and the camera seems to be just as like claustrophobic and just as, I don't know how you describe, just kind of like a little bit out of its element here in the jungle. Just it's looking around, it's looking straight up in one scene here, just for a few seconds up into the trees and the vines and the canopy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, the claustrophobic was the exact word that I was thinking of when I was watching this, because he gives you a sense. It's interesting. It's sort of orienting and disorienting at the same time, right? It's orienting in the sense that you start to get a feel for the lay of the land in the jungle, but disorienting in that the camera it takes several different shots, right? There's one where it's just pointing up at the canopy of the jungle, so so you get a sense of how tall the trees are and how isolated they probably feel at the bottom. Several times the camera focuses on the foreground to the background, so you get a sense of depth. He moves the camera left and right through the leaves of the jungle just to kind of give a sense of how leafy it is and how green it is, although we've learned that a lot of that was staged.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. Like that feeling of claustrophobia, little disorientation really starts to, you feel it in this section.
Mm-hmm. And I would go on to say that the claustrophobia, he really plays against that with some of these deeper shots where you mentioned Dutch and Poncho having a conversation. Behind Dutch and Poncho, if you're looking carefully, you'll see a couple little rivulets of a waterfall falling. It's one of those things like you would never really notice unless you're looking for it and watching it minute by minute. But when they're having their conversation, there's very clearly a couple little either waterfalls way in the background or maybe it's some mist, but it just it helps play up the angle of not only is this a claustrophobic place, but like it's a big place. There's like any direction you could go, it's just going to go into this deeper wildlands or hinterlands.
Yeah, take a wrong turn, you're underneath a waterfall. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice those waterfalls in the background watching the minutes several times in a row until I read over your notes and saw you had mentioned that. And I had to pause.
They certainly look like waterfalls, or they might, like I said, it might be mist too because they have a lot of mist.
Yeah, no, I think you're right though. When I looked at it carefully, I was like, oh yeah, there they are back there. Kind of a cool little detail.
Yeah, and it's nothing that we're meant to pay attention to or like even catch. It's just there is just like a little detail. Honestly, like I've been saying, for a lot of these things, it's something for the characters. It's something for the people in the movie to be experiencing.
Well, should we talk about some of the dialogue that happens in the minute?
Sure. Yeah. Not a ton of dialogue. If I'm counting the lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're looking at about 5 people speaking, or 5 different spoken lines of dialogue in this minute. Where it starts off with Dutch saying, "Get ahead and see what you can find," to Billy, and Billy saying, "Yes, sir," and charging off and chasing after those footprints, those signs of the guerrillas. And then later on, Dutch and Poncho are making their way through, a thicket of trees. And Poncho comes around Dutch, or Poncho is watching Billy. I believe what we're meant to think that he's watching Billy. So he's like second point, and then
right.
Dutch walks around Poncho and asks what's he got, and Poncho says, "Same business. Guerrillas hauled out 2 guys from the chopper, followed by men with American equipment. Do you remember Afghanistan?" And Dutch says,
"Trying to forget it. Come on." That was my terrible Arnold.
Sounds very playful. "Trying to forget it. Come on." Although when he says it,
Afghanistan. Trying to forget it. Come on.
It is interesting to me because there's a little bit of like a smile in when he's exchanging this with Poncho. He does.
It's like playful almost. Yeah.
Yeah, but as soon as he sends Poncho on and very honestly like fatherly or protective,
right. Run along, kiddo.
Right. Run along, Poncho. Run along, little Ponchito.
Ponchito. I just had a bunch of Ponchitos the other day down at Azteca.
Extra crispy with the chicken on the bottom. Oh, die for it. But as soon as he pushes Ponchito away after Billy again, like his face Arnold's face drops into this serious mask again. So he's clearly just trying to put him at ease, especially with like the line reading, trying to forget it.
Yeah, no, I made a note about that exact moment because a note in my brain. I don't write things down, John. I made a note about that because we had a conversation in a previous minute about how Arnold does so much visual acting with his eyes and his facial expressions, and you totally see it. You're absolutely right. In that moment, he sends Poncho along, and then you're right. His face drops, his eyes dart around. Clearly, he was putting on airs a little bit. He was trying to reassure Dutch. He said that playfully to him to reassure him, not Dutch, but Poncho, and send him on his way. As soon as Poncho leaves, you can tell that it's more serious to him that he's letting on. And you can just see that all in his eyes and his face and the way his whole expression changes. It's pretty great. Yeah.
It's pretty great. And it's really showing some leadership on Dutch's part. It's always part of being a good leader or teacher or parent or anything like that is that there's like that balance of doing the job, but also having that personable manner where you're trying to, connect with someone on a human level and right, not just see them as a job
Right.
or an asset. See my kids as assets. You're an expendable
You're an
asset.
expendable asset. You are a means to a paycheck.
My children are not expendable.
All right, so should we talk about the line about Afghanistan?
Yeah, we should. I looked it up in the old TV tropes because it instantly made me think about other movies that do this, that'll reference like a little thing and then they'll just kind of move on.
And never explain it, right?
Yeah, they never explain it, and you're never meant to know what it's about unless they make a prequel about it and then kind of ruin it all. Like, Clone Wars, that's what the Clone Wars are.
You fought in the Clone Wars?
Years ago, you served my father in the Clone Wars.
Begun. The Clone War has.
Oh, should have just left it alone.
Just let it lie. But in TV Tropes Talk, tvtropes.org is a great site for checking out the kind of cliches or just like the story beats or characters.
I've seen that website.
Archetypes. Yeah, it's a great site if you want to just like easily lose yourself for a couple hours in exploring the different kind of things that happen over and over in movies, film, TV, animation, stage acts. I don't know. Stage, right? It's like writing. I know it's like not gonna happen.
No.
But they call this the Noodle incident. And
I was going to ask you about this, not to interrupt, but do you know why it's called the Noodle incident? Is it referencing the original time this happened, perhaps, or
the original time this happened? We don't talk about it. See, you just don't know about it.
That's a good troll. Just call it the Noodle incident, and then never explain why it's called that. That would be perfect.
You remember the Noodle incident? Trying to forget it. Come on. So many
noodles. Don't you remember?
Did you ever read the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes?
Oh my God, John.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Side note.
Speaking your language,
this has now become the Calvin and Hobbes podcast. Sorry, everybody.
Calvin and Hobbes cast. I think there is a Calvin and Hobbes cast, just so you know.
Go on. I owned like every single Calvin and Hobbes collection when I was a kid.
Same. Same.
Yeah. I would read them front to back and back to front over and over again. I still have a couple of them as an adult, but I made the mistake of bringing them to my classroom. As you know, listeners, John and I are teachers. Mm-hmm. Word to the wise, kids, don't take anything that you enjoy or want to save to your classroom, because it will inevitably be destroyed, stolen, lost, I don't know, covered in boogers. I don't know.
Made fun of.
They won't understand. But I still have 3, I think, collections. And at one point I had 7 or 8.
Yeah, they made a ton of those collections. And I think my mom still has mine. So I just need to sometime go grab them all and bring them home, not to class, but
right. Yeah, don't take them to your classroom. Long story short, I love Calvin and Hobbes. It's my favorite comic that's ever been drawn / written of all time.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm bringing up the source right now from Calvin and Hobbes. I just searched Google Images for Noodle incident, and Calvin is telling Hobbes, all I can say is this year Santa had better bring everything on my list. I've been extremely good all year. And Hobbes says, what about the Noodle incident?
Yes.
And Calvin yells, no one can prove I did that.
I remember that comic.
Yeah. I'm seeing it now again. I remember it.
I do. Wow, that's great. As soon as you started reading it, it like popped into my memory. Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love that that's the reference. That's great.
That's the reference. And right, obviously with Afghanistan, we're not meant to know anything about it, but I did like instantly become curious about, wait, with all the examples they list on TV tropes, did they list Afghanistan mentioned on Predator? And they did. They put it in the examples. I was pretty proud. I don't know why I'm feeling a moment of pride of like, there's Predator on the internet. Like, it made it. But
it made it.
People know about this movie.
You mean your podcast is not the first content?
But I put in my notes, what do you think happened in Afghanistan? Because notice what he's saying, right? He's saying in the dialogue, same business, guerrillas hauled out 2 guys from the chopper, followed by men with American equipment. Then he immediately says, do you remember Afghanistan? Yeah,
so that's what I was going to bring up. He says it like almost in the same breath. Mm-hmm. Like whatever they're experiencing now clearly reminds him of what happened in Afghanistan.
Right.
So... You know, I could, there's jokes I suppose you could make there, but I was trying to think of it seriously, and something along the lines perhaps of like them searching for some soldiers that had either gone missing or been captured. Maybe they were in some situation where they were on a mission to go retrieve these particular soldiers and something bad happened. And so this is reminding Poncho of that incident because it's similar in style.
Sure. And at the time in Afghanistan, they would have been fighting the Soviets or Soviet-backed forces. Again, there's that great return of the awesome 80s villain.
Yeah, the evil Soviet villain, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have a theory?
I was thinking about this, pretty much since I wrote it down as a note, like that's all I've been thinking about. I haven't been thinking about work or parenting or going to the bathroom. It's just been the Afghanistan.
What the hell happened in Afghanistan?
What the hell happened?
You're like Jim Carrey in 13, just writing shit on the wall. Was that what it's called? 13?
No, I think it's 23? 23.
23. I'm close. Whatever.
Yeah,
John, I've been drinking.
I know. It's a terrible.
Whatever.
Terrible
you get the idea.
Yeah.
You're obsessive.
I'm obsessive. But yeah, I can't really think of anything that really comes to mind. And not that, that's just the way he asks is very like mysterious sounding. Like
it is.
Remember Afghanistan? Like I almost couldn't believe what happened in Afghanistan. And if it's a chopper that's down and people who are taken prisoner from the chopper, that doesn't seem that out of the ordinary for a rescue team. It seems like this specialized rescue team would have seen a lot of stuff, including, this maybe multiple times. So I don't understand how this is so mysterious. Maybe it's
right.
Well, if we think about it, like what's different about this? Well, you have like the other troops following the 6 Americans or the 6 people with American equipment following. So maybe there's that tie-in, like they weren't told something else, and maybe there's like a cover-up that they're not aware of, because obviously Dylan's not telling them the whole story. He's just really tight-lipped. In fact, in the beginning of this minute, as Dutch and Poncho are walking down, starting to follow Billy, Dutch just looks at Dylan, just gives him this paused look, where in the screenplay he says something about like make sure we don't have any accidents, but in the movie it's just cut out. It's just the silent look he gives Dylan. So maybe that's what Poncho's referring to and saying, maybe there's sneakier things afoot.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. It might be more general, like whatever situation they were in, there was an element of unknown or someone had kept some important information from them and it caused the mission to go awry. Like perhaps they met up with George Clooney and Ice Cube and Spike Jonze and they tried to go steal Saddam Hussein's gold.
Bad idea.
Oh, wait, that was in Iraq and that was the plot of Three Kings.
Right. That was a different movie. He's like, remember that movie with Ice Cube? Trying to forget it. Come on.
Oh, boy.
Remember that time
everyone.
A bunch of half-ass mountain boys took down a chopper in Afghanistan? Trying to forget it. The middle of the minute is following Billy as he's making his way, following the tracks, footprints, broken foliage, and the camera pans right to follow him. As it follows him right, some drums pick up a little bit. We'll talk about the drums, please, in a minute. And you hear some bird sounds, and right as you're hearing the drums and the bird sounds, all of a sudden Poncho's face, which had been blurred the whole time as it panned right, it focuses right on him. It rack focuses from Billy to Poncho, who's in the foreground, which you're watching this the first time, that really jumps out at you. That's almost like this, whoa, like he's been being, he has been being, no. Billy's under surveillance the whole time from his teammates. And that's something else that I talked a lot about in the beginning. I was first recording with Aaron, not only claustrophobia as a common motif, but also this being watched as a common motif.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's one of the things I like about this movie is, although it's clear when you're watching from the perspective of the predator rather than just the camera still moves in a way that makes you feel like you're sort of there watching everyone, right? Yeah, like from maybe a hidden vantage point or whatnot. It's it's really effective the way he moves the camera through this minute. And you mentioned the drums. I just want to say once again how much I love those damn drums. every time they come on, I'm just like, oh, yes, the drums. It just gives you like such a good feeling about, I don't know, it's so hard to explain, but it's just such the perfect sound, perfect score to be in the background when they're approaching something that's a little unknown.
And
I just
it
love
just adds to like all the jungle sounds and the music. So the music going on is just this kind of dun dun dun, and this very like march centric track where it's just like we're progressing through the jungle,
Right.
we're making our way.
It feels very jungly because of the rapid drumming sound. Yeah.
But it just creates like this wall of sound. Like it just not only are pinched in by all the scenery, Poncho's face all of a sudden being in your face, but also just auditorially you're closed in by this sound.
Right.
There's little in the way of, opening in terms of silence, little in terms of opening in terms of physical space. Even when we look up and see Poncho's view as he's looking up at supposedly some bird sounds, we're looking at the top of the canopy and the light is barely coming through. And it's not sunlight, it's just this overcast looking sky. I don't think we see the sun at all in this movie. And if so, maybe at the very, very, very end, because we didn't see it at the beginning either.
Right. Yeah. That's a interesting note about the being a wall of sound. I like that a lot. And if you watch this movie in like a proper surround sound system, like a 5.1 or a 7.1, what you notice is that when the drums come on, they come on through all the speakers.
Ooh.
And so you hear it surrounding you, and it's definitely a different sound. You're right. It does give you a sense of being closed in when those start up. So great.
So as we follow Billy picking up the trail, it cuts between the rack focus to Poncho's face, to Dutch and Poncho talking about Afghanistan, trying to forget it, to the last few seconds of this minute, which is at first this still shot of, not a still shot, it's just a static camera.
Static shot.
Just of the jungle itself with the vine hanging down. I'll talk about the vine in a minute. And then Billy rises up into the frame. And again, I think this is more John McTiernan trying out more of his camera tricks, where I believe the way Billy rises up into this is to give us a sense of Billy's isolation. He's out there tracking. So if anybody's going to find something, it's going to be Billy first. He's going to be the one to step into a trap or step into danger.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give away the next couple of minutes, but he'll be very much the first to discover something for the team as they make their jungle trek following the guerrilla trail. I just really like him popping up, and then he grabs this vine that's very much like the production team said, we need to put a vine right here. just the way it stands out reminds me of like old school animation or video games where like the background is animated in such a way. It's just like a still thing, a static, not moving thing. And then the one thing that the character is going to interact with, like, I don't know, a car or a crowbar, it's like that's differently animated. It's like lighter in color.
Yeah, it has a different color, and is clearly you're supposed to grab that item. Yeah, so the vine is like the crowbar from the Double Dragon.
Exactly.
Oh my god, it's my favorite. Double Dragon 2 is the greatest video game ever made.
Is that one 2-player? That one's 2-player co-op, right?
But they're both 2-player co-op, yeah.
No, Double Dragon 1, you took turns. I know this one because I remember going to a friend's. You could do the competitive part, the versus mode, where you're both Billy, or you're both Jimmy, or you're both...
In part 1, you couldn't play cooperatively?
No, not in the NES version.
Oh man, that's bullshit, dude. Part 2 was the bomb. You could play with your friend.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was awesome. So I'm glad you bring up the very end, because once again, after watching the minute over and over again and watching the very last section like over and over again looped, I feel like it would make another good GIF, because he really sort of like pops up from the jungle and like he whacks that branch out of the way and like then looks around left to right. And I like in the flow of the movie, it works really well. But once again, when you watch the minute over and over again, it starts to look pretty funny.
It appears to be like the one thing in his way, and he's like, "Well, I can take care of this."
It reminds me of what it reminds me of is are you a fan of Arrested Development?
Oh, a huge fan. I've seen the seasons many times.
Okay, so one of my favorite running gags that they do in Arrested Development is Tobias Fuke
No, I'm afraid I just blew myself.
will just sometimes he'll just enter a scene from a random position that makes zero sense. And there's one in particular that always makes me laugh where they're doing a scene in like the living room and you don't really notice him unless you're looking, but he's standing behind a large houseplant. And then all of a sudden he pushes the plant aside and he just emerges and he has a line in the conversation. And Billy sort of reminds me of Tobias Fuke here because the way he pops up and pushes the plant out of the way.
Right. Yeah, he pushes someone like this huge, like obviously placed there leaf out of the way, and then he just like the one thing else in frame, he just grabs this vine. He's like, I'm gonna hack this to pieces.
Right.
Without any context, you think is like he's hacking his way through like a really thin part of the jungle. Just walk around it, Billy.
Yeah, and we'll get to it in the next minute, but the way he lets the fluid drip onto his lapel really bothers me. It's I'm just waiting for that drip to hit the inside and like touch his bare skin, and I worry about him.
Worry about you, Billy.
You don't want that cold liquid on the inside of your shirt.
Next couple minutes we'll definitely be talking about what's in that vine. Is that just like
so milky
and hydrating and nutritious and jungle-tastic? Like I said, like all the jungle things that we've been reading about in the field manual for jungle operations, like do not really apply to this team. They are just
they're just trekking through and throwing grenades.
Yeah, chucking through. Yeah, taking grenades out. I like in this scene also with Billy. He is chopping the vine. He's using this much larger machete, and very clearly,
it's huge.
In his side pocket, he also has what appears to be like a Bowie knife or something like that. It's like that's not a knife. It's like no, this is that's my stabbing knife. This is my vine knife.
Killing a fly with a bazooka, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I didn't notice that.
Every episode or so, I'm looking at this 1982 field manual for the Army titled Jungle Operations because it seemed fitting finding a document that'd be talking about what the Army would be reading here in the 80s in terms of how to operate in the jungle, how to complete missions, how to track people, how to gear up. With the mention of boots a couple of different times and Billy tracking those boots, saying that these must be American boots, I did a little bit of research, and the field manual for the Army on a page about jungle gear just mentions a little bit about jungle boots, and I'll have some more details in a minute. But it mentions that these boots are lighter and faster drying than all leather boots. Their cleated soles will maintain footing on steep, slippery slopes. The ventilating insoles should be washed in warm, soapy water when the situation allows. And there's this beautiful little illustration someone did of, the soldier holding the M16. It says jungle fatigues, it says jungle boots, and then it shows
he looks
him
very, very happy there, doesn't he?
It shows him. It looks thrilled to be in the jungle. It's like even illustrated people do not want to be in the jungle.
Do you see in this picture below it says insect bar?
Yeah, the insect bar refers to the shield you'd put around like when you're resting. It's like a mosquito net, basically.
No, that's where they all go to have a drink after they're done with their insect work. Come on, John.
Yeah, they're drinking some delicious...
It's the insect bar.
Insect bar, right. Tie one on. It's 5 o'clock somewhere in the insect world. They call the bugs from A Bug's Life or whatever.
They work hard. They can carry 500 times their own weight.
Yeah, they work hard doing their own little insect jobs. Kick and tie a few on an insect bar. So the jungle boots are not talked a lot about in the field manual other than that, and showing a kind of a crudely illustrated picture of jungle boots. But I did a little bit of research on jungle boots, as you do, and Wikipedia tells me that during the 1980s they were adding some things to the jungle boots that were in use by the Army during the Vietnam War. They are adding such things as a rubber sole composition and use of waterproof pour-on linings instead of saran ventilating insoles, which turned out to be a huge problem I was reading about in the Wikipedia article and also on some forums from soldiersystems.net, where a lot of veterans would go on and complain about how they switched to the pour-on in the 80s and they need to go back to Saran. I don't know what that means. I think Saran is the company that makes Saran wrap, but they're also making these insoles that were not like Saran wrap insoles, which sounds like the least ventilating thing ever, but reading about it, they're kind of like Gore-Tex for feet, and the boots were made in such a way where they had hollow spaces under the insoles to allow air ventilation. And how did you allow the water ventilation? Well, the boots themselves have these little eyelets, almost like when you tie your shoe, you put your laces through these eyelets. These eyelets would be right at the bottom of the shoe, so that as you step out of the water, out of the muck, and you push your foot down, the water would vacate from the boot pretty quickly. And then the air holes or the vacuums under the feet or the air pockets would allow the feet to dry up, which would be preventing what some people slangily called trench feet or paddy feet. So just a little bit about the jungle boots. And I don't know about you, but just like boots in general, I'm not a big boot wearer, so I can't imagine being in the Army and wearing jungle boots.
I'm not a big boot wearer either. I enjoy my outdoor winter sports. I'm a skier, so I wear my ski boots. But just recently, I was at I went to a college football game, and I don't know if anyone caught the Washington State Apple Cup, but if you watched that game, it was dumping snow. I was at that game. I was standing in the snow, and in my 3.5 hours of standing there, I wished I had worn boots that had eyelets to get rid of the icy cold water that was pooling under my feet.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I was bundled up in every other way, but I did not think about bringing good waterproof shoes or boots, and my feet were essentially ice blocks by the end.
Oh, man.
So made me realize, like, if you are on a long trek where you are in the elements, my feet were frozen and it hurt like hell, and I can only imagine being stuck in a cold, wet environment for an extended period of time. I was able to leave the game and go warm up inside somewhere, and it was fine. But having shoes or boots that were not well insulated or designed for the environment would suck.
Yeah, it really suck.
It would really suck.
You mentioned long treks, and what people online were generally saying was that if you're not in the elements and you're still making a long trek, you would not be using a jungle boot because, like I mentioned before, they had these hard rubber soles, meaning you could push down a little bit easier on like the less than solid terrain and give yourself a little boost based on your boots. But you wouldn't wear that for a longer trek because you'd always be hitting that high heel, and that would cause a lot of sore feet, and not the paddy feet or trench feet, but more like just, I don't know, heel blowouts and the like. And
this has been your Boot Minute.
Your Boot Minute. So go out and buy some vintage.
Get some high quality boots, folks. Save your feet.
Boots.
It's Forrest Gump, right? In Forrest Gump, he says, "Take care of your feet."
Take good care of your feet.
He does. He's like, change your socks. Take care of your feet.
God dang it, Jeff! I'm gonna have to put that in the cuts
Lieutenant
now.
Dan.
I'm gonna have to put that audio in.
I keep on
Lieutenant
adding
Dan.
cuts.
No, it's great. It's great fun. I greatly enjoy that.
Oh yeah, no, I love it.
In the director commentary, John McTiernan is continuing on with what he started to talk about a couple minutes ago, which is really just about how hard it was to make the jungle look legitimate. Where they had to add a lot of vines and leaves in front of the camera. And he's saying this as this minute's playing, meaning a lot of the things that we're seeing being pushed aside by Billy, or that's right in the way of the camera as Dutch and Poncho are talking, are added there just artificially. They're not part of the scenery. They had to import those. He also went on to mention just a little bit about, and this will be talked about a lot later in later minutes, but in the beginning, he had these just huge crowds of crew people from Mexico, because when they filmed in Mexico, part of the deal was that they had to run all their labor through the sindicato, which, right, in Spanish means syndicate. So so there's a huge labor union down there, and a lot of people without a lot of training who are just part of the sindicato. That's something to touch on in the next couple minutes when there's a little bit more details that he provides, but just something to think about when you're seeing these films and it seems so isolated. There's still just tons of people on the set doing either nothing or doing just very little, at least for the first few minutes, because for the most part, I believe a lot of this movie was shot chronologically.
Man, what a nightmare. Hundreds of people and don't know what to do with them.
Yep.
They have no movie training probably whatsoever.
Yep.
Yeah, wow. Interesting. Yeah, we'll have to get into that later because that I'm sure there's some good stories to go along with that.
It reminds me of being a leadership teacher where it'd be like, oh, here's this one job for maybe 4 or 5 students, and the class was maybe 30 students. Like, what am I doing with the other 25, 26 students?
Right.
You're just like standing around, like, yeah, you're earning your leadership cred, but you're like, what do I do with you?
Right.
Okay, the last thing I had was just a big what if, being the big what if of if they had found the chopper and they had found the cabinet minister and the aide killed there on scene, either during the chopper crash or killed by the guerrillas, what do you think would have happened? I have my own like single theory, but
fade to black, credits roll.
Fade to black, credits roll. They just played the repelling scene in reverse. They're just like, whoop, whoop.
And done. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'm not quite sure. I mean, would that change the story that much? I mean, if the idea is that this is the fact that they're chasing this person, or trying to rescue this person is really just it's a construct to get this group of people into the jungle so that we can tell the story of the predator hunting them down and killing them, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it necessarily matters if they live or die. The point of the story, at least, is to get this group of soldiers into the jungle so that they can run into the predator. Yeah.
Right. It would just been interesting to me. I wouldn't want to see that and like change the whole movie, but it's just interesting to speculate a little bit about what would they have done? Would they have just immediately tried to evac out of there, or would they have sought revenge and still followed the dozen or so boots?
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Said, hey, it's payback time.
Right.
Right.
Time to throw some grenades.
The more I think about that scene, the more I am excited about that scene because they just flip and go nuts. They just
push the car down the hill. That'll be a good way to open up the fighting.
Because they see the one guy killed, but they don't know about the other guy if they're just chucking grenades. So like, well, I hope he's already been killed because if not, like...
Well, he's dead now.
He's just in chunks now. He was dead when we got there.
Oh, man, that's going to be great. I have to tell you, John, your notes are really well done. Always.
Thank you.
They're always really well organized. I'm always impressed. You put a lot of time into these. Yeah.
Oh, the last thing I would say to mention is that during this scene, before Billy chops down the vine even, in the script, we have Dutch talking to Dylan and giving him a little kind of like sarcastic, we don't want any accidents to Dylan. And then it shows the whole team in the script rappelling down cliffs. And
this is all in the script?
This is all in the script. And so that's another awesome change, in my opinion, that McTiernan made, where he said we don't need to see them rappelling or making huge trips through the jungle. We just need to see it like place to place.
Right.
With this minute we're watching being one of the few transition minutes, I would say, where you're going from something to another thing. Talk about the other thing yet, but obviously let's save that for the end of next minute. But also in the script at this point, before Billy chops down the vine, we start to see a couple things from the Predator. We see the Predator's active camouflage, moving around and actually glowing the yellow eyes for us, the audience.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, they brought it in earlier.
Yeah, just a few minutes early. I believe it's 3 minutes earlier than what we see in the movie. And it also starts to show the Predator's vision. The altered POV is what they call it in the script.
The heat vision, it kind of looks like.
Yes, the quote-unquote heat vision.
Right.
And for those minutes, I've been talking to my dad. I think my dad was all for coming on, talking on the show about that, because he's actually done a lot of work with heat vision cameras, with infrared cameras, and
really
the tech field. So yeah, he would have a lot to say.
Oh, awesome!
So I'm really, really excited for that. Have another Zabriskie on there.
You're just good running through every family member.
Every Zabriskie. If you have Zabriskie in your name, I'm coming.
When is your daughter coming on?
She was on one of the early episodes, just by kind of like yelling in the background.
Yeah, she was. She popped into the room.
She had some cameos in the early episodes where I had to edit out probably 10 or 15 minutes of a side time of me talking her down and saying, no, you come back in a few minutes.
Right.
Dad's recording right now. Dad's drinking at 11 in the morning on a Saturday.
It's all good. It's all good.
So yeah, speaking of the next couple of minutes, Jeff and I are expecting some really special guests here. I'm not going to spoil who this will be, but I can give you a little hint. It has a lot to do with Billy making a frightening discovery in the jungle. So if you can run run in your minds the movie catalog scenes so different scenes from different movies where people came across scary images in the jungle. Try to see if you can line that up with one of the movies covered by some Movies by Minute folks. So I'm gonna leave it there, though.
Quite the cliffhanger, John.
Yeah, cliffhanger. If you want to find out who it is, you either have to listen or just read the show notes for next week.
You can just do that.
You could, yeah, that's what people do all the time on like these podcasts. So like, we're not going to tell you, right, who's making an appearance, but it's in the show notes.
In the show notes.
It'll be in the show notes. So, do you want to talk about where people can find you, Jeff?
Oh, of course, my favorite part of the show, where I give my Twitter handle. And then immediately I immediately just watch my follower count skyrocket every single time. Bump. The Predator Minute Bump. You can find me at Carl. That's Carl with a K. Carl _Hungus. That's a capital H. Capital K Carl _ H Hungus. Don't forget the 314.
Pie.
I'm on Twitter, occasionally retweeting things. Come find me there.
Hey, speaking of Carl Hungus.
Yes.
Yeah, he is played, we talked about this before, but he's played by Peter Stormare. And then and Peter Stormare is like, it's like Jack Palance nowadays. Like anytime he pops up, I'm thinking back to the podcast. I was watching this kind of anime series on Netflix called Castlevania, and Peter Stormare plays an awesome character. I can't remember his name. It's something like Godbrand or something like that. But his character in like this world of serious vampires and vampire lords and evil battling good to like the highest degree, and just like gore and guts everywhere in this series. Peter Stormare's character is like this kind of light-hearted demon who's on the bad side, but who's always like kind of ribbing the other vampire lords and the other demons.
Yes.
And so I immediately think of Carl Hungus whenever I hear his voice. And he's just such a highlight of that show. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So if we were giving daily or weekly recommends, that would be my weekly recommend would be Castlevania and the Peter Stormare episodes, which I don't think start until season 2.
Castlevania with a Carl Hungus tie-in.
But it's Castlevania with a C, so I know if your K finger might be tired, right. You can reach over to the C just
it's
for
a castle with a K _ Vania.
Yeah, 314.
314. You can find me.
Carl Hungus. Vania.
All right, very cool.
So, Carl Hungus, did you have any recommends we can go over real quick? Anything from the week that's caught your eye or ear?
Let's see. I just this is a TV show. I just finished watching Homecoming on Amazon Prime, which is an Amazon Prime original starring Julia Roberts. It's 10 episodes. It's a quick watch. Each episode's only a half an hour. And it's really good. It jumps back and forth in time, and it's about Julia Roberts plays a woman who used to work for a company, a private company that would help soldiers reacclimate themselves to life at home. And turns out that some weird stuff was going on at this place where the soldiers would go. I don't want to talk any more about it to spoil it. Julia Roberts is really good in it, and the story is pretty cool and interesting, and it's a fast watch. So I recommend those 10 episodes, Homecoming. Very
awesome. Just as a unrelated note, did any of these soldiers see jungle combat that you know of?
I think some of them may have found some gold. I think Spike Jonze was there, and maybe Ice Cube.
All right. I'm trying to forget it.
George Clooney. And Marky Mark. Marky Mark was there too.
Hey, forget about it, brah. Fucking gold.
Yeah. Just in the fucking desert.
In the fucking desert.
Wait, that's the plot of Three Kings.
Are we shooting people or what?
This is 3 Kings Minute podcast, right?
It is not 3 Kings Minute podcast.
Oh, shit.
Shit.
I put on the wrong Google Hangouts number.
This is John with a K. Come on.
All right, that's it. That's all I got to recommend.
Thank you for the recommend. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Right. Give the listeners something to go fill up their eyeballs with.
There we
filling
go.
up their earballs with lots of Predator talk.
Their
earballs. Gross. But eyeballs isn't gross, but earballs are. Yeah.
Earballs is disgusting.
Yeah, it's just we'll never say that again. Earballs. I want to give credit. I don't know. How would you say it? Give a shout out? That sounds lame. That's very millennial. I'll give a shout out to the artist providing our bumper music for the intro and outro. It is Chaosware, just totally ripping it up on the electric guitar. The Predator theme, originally by Alan Silvestri. But if you go to Chaosware's page, that's Kaosware, you will find his Predator cover in which he plays this electric guitar, and he's done something with the graphics to make the electric guitar take on active camouflage as he's playing. It is awesome. It just blends in with everything else. I have no idea how he did it, but he was gracious enough to let us use the audio for the intro and outro. Also, someone providing permission to use their music, which I probably should do more of, but who has the time? For the Jungle Operations Field Manual, I have an intro music playing by the artist Smooth McGroove, who's a YouTube acapella singer. He's the kind of YouTube artist where he puts up 8 different panels of himself singing the different parts of the song acapella, and it creates this awesome layered effect of hearing the complete song. And the song we use for the field manual for Jungle Operations is his cover of the Jungle theme and the intro to the NES game Contra.
Nice.
And so it's very melodic. It's very soothing when you first listen to it, but then it dives into the stage music, and it's pushing. It's very moving, and I really enjoy it. And when I asked him if I could use that little clip, he said yes. So
that's awesome.
Thanks, Smooth.
Yeah, thank you, Smooth.
And if you have ever tried to forget Afghanistan,
Trying to forget it. Come on.
please email us at predatorminute@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. You can find the home feed at SoundCloud, home of the RSS feed also. But we're on all kinds of podcatching services, namely the big 3, iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Although I don't know if Google Play is really that big. I think it's really Stitcher and iTunes running the game.
Spotify is getting big too on podcasts.
Spotify, yeah. For Spotify, I think I have to join Libsyn and pay a monthly subscription.
If you have stolen any gold from Saddam Hussein,
Are we shooting people or what?
Oh my God, this
with,
again.
with Spike Jones and Ice Cube and Marky Mark.
Don't email us.
Keep it to yourself.
Keep it to yourself. Yeah, keep that gold, because people are just going to want to steal gold. It's, a gold-based economy still. All of our money based on the promise of gold and silver. For Predator Minute, I've been John Zabriskie.
And I'm Jeff Glover.
And until next time,
stick around.